and it's history, right? And I think it has to do with the communal nature, right? That's fundamentally anti-American, unless there's a tragedy, right? Then hey, if you can donate to the Red Cross and do all that, look at how we take care of each other.
Yeah.
But if we ever have to be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't GoFundMe for your diabetes prescription, maybe we should just take care of you.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're a communist.
Exactly.
Right. And like same with maybe, hey, people are coming to this country and all they're doing is contributing. All they're doing is working at the jobs that are the least desirable, that are the most open to exploitation, often are victims of wage theft, can't access the protections of citizenship that at one point in time, depending on the administration, exists. And we are okay with the way that we're talking about them. Like, we have such a competitive individual mindset. That's my take. I would love to hear yours.
Absolutely. I want to backtrack real quick though on one thing. Please. So just give me 1 second, because you hit up such an incredibly important point, and I got a really important story about this, but I got to kind of talk about it broadly to protect the brothers' identity, right?
Yeah.
So there's a dude who he's a driver around town. He was helping me get to the airport. I know this cat, and he's been in this country 26 years. 28 years ago, he was in Morocco and was filing for divorce, and then came here, right?
Okay.
He's driving me to the airport, and he's saying he was really down. I was like, dude, what's going on? Like, he's usually just pretty good spirits. We've known each other for years, just had this little rapport. And he said that the federal government is investigating. He's like a naturalized citizen, and they're going back through his paperwork, because when he filled it out initially, it said he was married. And when his divorce was finalized, he didn't update it to say now that he's divorced. This is a cat. Exactly. No, and this cat's like 10 years older than I am. And even though he's got family in Morocco, he's like, he doesn't really have a place to stay. Everything is diffused, all this stuff. So this dude, after 26 years in this country, is facing deportation because of this nonsense, for literally not updating a form, instead of what Elon Musk did, where he's like, oh, I overstayed and I was here and I was working, it was illegal and all this stuff,
Yeah.
And that is the audacity of whiteness. That is the caucasity of it right there, that the rules apply until they don't. And when you have when you're a billionaire son of an emerald miner as a white South African, it's totally cool to break the rules. Here in Tucson, if you're a Canadian immigrant, which it's like when people say Canadian, they see like a Justin Trudeau. I know there's a total mix and all this stuff. So I'm not trying to homogenize, but point being that those cats don't have to deal with all that stuff. And it just kills me, because I'm seeing it on the material level. And even if he stays, you've got this dude who's barely making above minimum wage, having to hire an attorney. And we all know the law may be lying, but it ain't free. So
right.
So what's so scary about communism? I think that there's a couple of things embedded in it. One, and we on the more progressive side of things, we do need to be serious about this. There were some royally messed up things with the USSR and
100%.
Exactly. And I think we kind of gloss over the sort of the totalitarian nature of folks. And there is something legitimately scary, about that. Okay. And so when I was a kid and the Russian national wrestling team came to my town, and like they were doing seminars, and, we were putting them up, and you see them just like something like having a pair of Levi's, and they're like, oh, there's this little sense of freedom. You can see how much they were under pressure. So I don't think that we can entirely that fear of communism is entirely just in the imaginary, in the way that whiteness is. But this is like huge. I think that the big reason why it's a convenient whipping sort of a convenient sort of red herring is that it's the incredible threat of a good example. That you have this ability to, like, it highlights a bunch of the underlying lies that we tell each other on a regular basis, that through hard work you're going to succeed, that meritocracy exists. I mean, Pete Hegseth, great.
Yo,
Yeah.
I've been railing against Pete Hegseth for the last few weeks on here because he's from Minnesota, and I feel it's my moral obligation.
It's so that giving the billionaire class and multimillionaire class massive tax breaks that they don't need is in some way going to raise all boats, and that free market capitalism will be the savior of all of us, and that like all of these things are just lies that communism in many respects rebuts. It says, no, we can actually do this in a different way. There is so much wealth that is here, right? That it doesn't, that it doesn't have to be this way. That, for all intents and purposes, the idea of a billionaire it simply shouldn't exist. As long as
Absolutely not.
As long as there are people who are hungry, as long as there are people who are struggling to get educated, as long as all these different things are happening, there should not be a billion, because all that means is that you're hoarding resources, you're hoarding wealth while other people are suffering. And then they say, well, I earned it. Absolutely not. If you look at how many Amazon vehicles are going up and down your street on a regular basis, without us and our tax base creating those streets in the first place, Jeff Bezos doesn't have anywhere to take his folks. He can't do it unless they exploit the collective resources that we have done together, and also the labor that we are putting into that. And you think that you deserve $150 billion? No, pay your driver a reasonable amount. Allow your company to be taxed so that we can keep and maintain those roads. Make sure that you're investing in our schools so that you can, it requires a reformulation of sort of our underlying ideological structure, but it undercuts that rugged individualism, which was never there in the first place.
Never there in the first place. And I think that's the thing. What I tell my students all the time is, to your point of like, at its most basic, right? Like, communism is an economic system just like capitalism is. And totalitarianism and authoritarianism are government systems just like democracy is.
Exactly.
And so we can have conversations about what they align and all that, but my point in bringing that up is the opposite of communism is not democracy.
Exactly.
Right, like they're not the same systems.
You're talking an economic versus a government system.
Yeah, exactly.
It's and so apples and oranges, and you're trying to put them together. And
the successful collusion or like collapsing of that, right, in our public in the dialogue and discourse is, I think it's just something where, I mean, we're still seeing it's 2025, and Stephen Miller's talking about communist woke ideology. And if you go and you talk to somebody and you say, hey, do you think that, workers should be paid a decent wage? Do you need a little bit more? And they're going to be like, yeah, that's what I voted. And ironically, that's what I voted for Trump to do. Lower taxes and give me more money.
Exactly. And that's actually a tax break that works. When you see more progressive economists, they actually say that, tax breaks actually do work if you focus them on low and medium income people, because when you give them that
money,
we spend money, and we spend money on the things that are our everyday things. So like that mom and pop store up the street that, I can't spend on right now because my paycheck is, too small. Now I can invest in you. I can actually be there, and it builds up our communities in the process. What doesn't work is trying to give a $5 trillion discount to folks who don't freaking need it. And that's the biggest thing that we have to keep understanding is, and it just drives me nuts how I loved seeing Elon being like, Tim Walz is a bully, and he takes pride in Tesla stock falling, and he's just such a bad person. It's like, bro, like, if you weren't such a horrible person, your company would be thriving right now. The company that people love is Ben and Jerry's. Those cats throw
Right.
down to the community. Arizona iced tea. This we could make more money, but we want people, just our everyday people, to be able to, we're going to try to keep it as, away from inflation as possible, and we don't need more.
Right.
But those are the anomalies. The system is set up for multinational corporations to be. Well, I mean that was the that documentary back in the early 2000s about the corporation. Basically, if it was a person, because citizens, because the corporations are given the same rights as citizens.
First Amendment side,
that basically it would be a sociopath. No consideration of people, no consideration of the environment. It's money is the bottom line, and at the end of the day, that's why these contradictions in Marxism that Marx talks about are all coming to fruition, because you don't have to. It's the logical extrapolation of capitalist over consumption and exploitation in the process.
And I want to be clear. And what I tell people too is, one, I'm an academic. I study economic and racial theory, and so I talk in terms of like socialism, communism, capitalism. I recognize we are in the 21st century. We're almost a quarter way through the 21st century and live in a world that those cats couldn't even consider. Adam Smith and Karl Marx were not talking about AI in the way that it's gonna down it is right now, right? Like, so I'm not saying we have to choose one. I'm saying that the principles that undergird what's happening, right? Either we're gonna have an economic system that cares about people a little bit, or one that cares about growth and consumption and the bottom line over everything. And I remember a few years ago, I was guest lecturing in a business ethics class. So you can imagine how that went. And literally there were overwhelming majority of the students in that class argued that their ethics were in what's in the best interest of stakeholders. Exactly. That would drive that was the ethical framework that they had. Right. And it's and so I'm saying that not to be like, look at how bad these kids are or these students. I'm saying that is the framework that is being used. That is what's saying, like, no, this is what ethics is. It's not, and we're gonna see with Mangione this trial, like, and I'm not condemning anything, but I'm saying, like, you can't continue to keep life-saving medicine from people and expect people not to buck back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you saw that with that saying that tech bro, I can't remember what his name is, who bought up all the AIDS medication and then jacked up the price a couple $1,000%. And
that's like, right. Yeah.
And he still doesn't think there's anything wrong with that. It's like,
right.
I mean, that's the definition of a sociopath. Like this is where we're at. And I mean, if it sounds hippie woo-woo for us to care about each other, then I'll throw on my Birkenstocks and tie-dye, because I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like,
that's what we got to do.
Exactly. But then remember who the ultimate hippy dippy person was Jesus. I mean, at the end of the day, the only time he got royally pissed off at folk, he wasn't pissed off at the Roman soldiers who were taking him away. He even forgave Judas, who turned on him. He wasn't pissed off at the sex workers and the lepers and all this stuff. The only people were the money changers who corrupted the nature of his father's temple. That was it.
That's when he geeked. Yep.
Exactly. And so now we have all this nonsense about, I mean, shoot, they're going to be able to fund Christian charter schools, because let's be honest, it's Christian charter schools with government money, which is a huge violation of the separation of church and state. And folks keep saying it under the guise of that, we need more religion to combat our moral decay. And I'm like, nah, son. We need more actual Jesus in modern day Christianity. That's where we need it.
Listen, if Jesus came back today, he'd be deported for being a threat to national security, because he'd be talking about free Palestine and talking and saying what's going on.
Absolutely. And then the same thing with all the erasure of historical memory. We do the same thing with Dr. King, right? It's like,
absolutely.
Oh my God, the number of times in the mainstream media that I see, Dr. King said, we want to be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. So Dr. King was colorblind and I'm living out his legacy. It's like BS. You read one half of one line, and I'm sitting here look at the totality of the man's of his history, his legacy, his speeches that he gave. I mean, he was an anti-racist, democratic socialist with a radical ethic of love and a deep distrust
Anti-war.
and anti-war, and also said that the United States is the biggest purveyor of violence in the world. That's the legacy. And so also, we also forget that inconvenient truth that something like when he was assassinated, 76% of white folk had a disfavorable rating of him, right?
Yeah. And he was the most dangerous man. J. Edgar Hoover said he was the most dangerous man in America. It was,
Exactly.
you know, FBI sending him "go kill yourself" letters.
Exactly. And yet, yes, he was a philanderer, and they tried to use that against him to undermine the entire movement. But at the same time, it's sort of like, my gosh, look, which of the guys in Washington attacking him weren't doing all that nonsense?
Well, and yeah, if we want to go skeletons and closets, let's talk about glass houses and all that. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
And also, this is the part that kills me for white folks out there. Is like, even if you only got, say you only got that part, right, and you really took that to heart, how do you see what's happening now and say, oh yeah, that's the content of that guy's character, of Pete Hegseth, that's who I want there, of Donald Trump, of like, even again, we talked about this the last time we were on our own, on those own terms,
yes,
you fail.
Absolutely.
Even on a meritocracy scale, you fail. You are the least meritocratic person that we could possibly think of. Like, y'all got the goofiest of goofies over here. Like, kids who clearly, I don't know what Stephen Miller needed as a child. Like, I don't know what hugs he needed. I don't know what happened.
Yes.
But like, whatever it is, bro, you're not gonna get it by hating and being as mediocre as you are. And you're mediocre.
Exactly. And that's why they had those tote bags that say, for BIPOC folk, carry yourself with the
confidence of a mediocre white man.
Exactly, of a mediocre white man. But the same thing. But then, you know what? Other folks, even our BIPOC brethren, try to emulate it, because Kash Patel is a mediocre FBI director, and you have these same things that keep popping up. All these folks are mediocre, but they kiss the ring and bend the knee. And that's, and sycophantery is the most important qualification right now.
Absolutely. You see the nonsense at the cabinet. It's funny that you talk about Kash Patel, because there's we could on a national level. You see Eric Adams, like, clearly quid pro quo. Hey, I'm gonna go to jail. Nah, I'll let you open up ICE and Rikers, and we'll do all that. Just drop these charges. And then I just found out today that Chief
the National Security Advisor.
Yeah, Walls.
Walls. Yeah, exactly.
He went to the UN. But Chief Rondo, who was he was the chief of the Minneapolis police during the uprisings in Georgia. He has a book coming out talking about seeking justice for the murder of George Floyd. This dude was one of two people who saw the tape, who saw what happened, and co-signed that Floyd died of a medical emergency. It wasn't until Darnella Frazier put out on social media the video of what happened. And now this dude is out here selling books on it. And I'm like, we just don't have, we don't have this systemic understanding. The values of whiteness and capitalism shape so much of the waters that we live in, that we are, and I see that, like, that's the damage, and it's damaging activists and organizing communities. It's damaging the left, because we don't take that. We're vicious with people and incompetent with systems too much, right? Where we don't understand this, the impact that systems are having, and how that impacts how we need to show up for people with some compassion, with some grace, and with some healing, right? Which is why we're doing the antidote. Hopefully we can offer some of that.